Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking that stack of sources you provided us, the advanced training materials, the linguistic analyses of modern English, all of it.
In those native speaker transcripts, which are really revealing.
Look, they're transcripts, and we're going to distill all of that down into the clearest, most, well, potent knowledge toolkit that we possibly can.
And our topic today is, it's one of those things that sounds deceptively simple, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Describing your daily routine.
It sounds like the first thing you'd learn in a new language, something you master at A2. But for the advanced learner, for that C1 speaker, describing your day becomes this ultimate fluency test.
And most people, when you ask them, they just fall back on this purely functional sequence. It's just a list.
It's a list that, completely lacks depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're challenging you, the listener, right now. When was the last time you actually described your routine in English? Was it just, I wake up, then I drink coffee, next I go to work?
If that sounds familiar, you've probably created what our sources call a preemptor list.
A preemptor list. I like that term. What exactly does it mean?
It's a term used in advanced language training to describe that B1, B2 level trap. It's when you rely almost entirely on these basic sequential linkers, first, then, next, after that.
It's grammatically correct, of course.
Oh, completely. But it's entirely transactional. It just transfers the raw data of your schedule without any context, without any personality.
And crucially, it doesn't convey you. It's flat. It's like reading an instruction manual for a toaster.
That's a perfect analogy.
So our mission today is to fundamentally change how you think about and articulate your daily life. We want to move beyond that checklist.
We want to help you transform your routine into a sophisticated, compelling, personal narrative.
The paradigm shift here is, it feels pretty profound. When you describe your day at a C1 level, you're not just listing actions.
No, you're engaging in an act of self-expression. It's almost a kind of personal branding. Yeah. The language you choose signals your priorities, your energy levels, your work ethic, your whole approach to life.
It's the difference between saying, I eat lunch, and, say, describing how you savor a moment of quiet reflection away from your desk.
One is functional, the other is intentional.
Right. So we need a toolkit that lets us show the listener who we are, not just tell them what we do.
Precisely. And that journey, it has to begin with the scaffolding, the narrative structure itself. If we don't fix the framework, all the advanced vocabulary we add later will just sound, disjointed.
It'll feel stuck on, not integrated.
Exactly. So we have to replace those abrupt, isolating sequential linkers that make the routine sound like a series of bullet points.
Okay, so let's unpack this structural overhaul. Let's start right at the beginning of the day. How do we immediately signal that a routine is ingrained, that it's a habit you strictly observe?
Well, you use phrases that establish an unwavering habit, a non-negotiable rule. And the simplest upgrade is often just a vocabulary choice.
So instead of the basic, first, I start my day by checking the news.
You can elevate it. One of the powerful examples we found was replacing first I start with my day invariably commences with.
Okay, invariably commences. Let's break that down.
It does two things instantly. First, invariably suggests a strict, non-negotiable rule. It signals discipline, consistency. This isn't just something you do sometimes. It's a fixed law in your life.
It's a statement of identity.
Yes. And second, commences is a more formal, deliberate verb. It sounds intentional, like the beginning of an important, structured undertaking. It's a world away from the simple verb starts.
And that formality immediately raises the perceived importance of whatever action follows. What if you want to put even stronger emphasis on that discipline? Maybe you're trying to protect your quiet time.
In that case, you could use a structural approach that's focused on sort of reservation. You could try. Without fail, the first 30 minutes of my day are reserved for reading No Screens Allowed.
Without fail. I like that. It's a powerful synonym for invariably.
It is. And the phrase are reserved for is key. It tells the listener that this time is protected, it's a non-negotiable block of time, and it signals that setting boundaries is a core priority for you.
That sets a very powerful tone, especially in a world where, everyone expects you to be available 24/7.
Exactly.
Now, let's shift to the professional routine. When you're describing your workday, you need language that frames that first task not just as a task, but as a strategy.
Absolutely. You're moving from sequence to strategy. The phrase, The first order of business is always to triage my inbox is fantastic for this.
Order of business.
Yeah.
That sounds very formal, very professional.
It does, and the verb triage is so potent.
It's borrowed from medicine, right? From disaster response.
Yes, and that's what makes it so effective. It implies categorization, assessment, urgent prioritization. By using triage, you sound methodical, strategic, and calm under pressure. You're managing complexity, not just reacting to emails.
It really does speak volumes about your approach to work. Okay, so we've established the beginning with these signals of habit and priority. Now we need to link the next actions fluidly. That simple word then just creates a stop-start effect.
It does. We need connectors that suggest a natural progression or a logical relationship between the actions.
So swapping then for words like subsequently or thereafter.
Exactly. For example, I spend an hour at the gym and subsequently I'll grab breakfast. Subsequently feels more formal and fluid. It implies that the second action follows logically from the first. It removes that choppy feeling.
And this is where we can really start to demonstrate C1 mastery, right? By building complex sentence structures that explain the why, the internal logic of the routine.
Yes, using a clause as a trigger. This is a major structural upgrade.
So instead of two simple sentences.
You create one complex statement. For instance, once I've cleared the decks of my most urgent emails, my focus invariably shifts to my main project for the day.
Ah, I see. The completion of action X clearing the decks is explicitly stated as the necessary trigger for action Y.
You're explaining causality, not just chronology. It's much more sophisticated.
It sounds more natural, too.
Yeah.
It implies a conscious, managed transition. Are there idioms we can use to express this same kind of cause and effect relationship?
Definitely. Look at a phrase like paves the way for.
Okay.
It beautifully articulates how one preparatory action makes a larger, more important action possible. My early morning strategy session sets the agenda for the rest of the day, which then paves the way for an afternoon of deep, uninterrupted work.
Paves the way for. That's a great choice. It gives you this strong visual metaphor of laying the groundwork, removing obstacles, literally making the path smoother for the next big task.
So to sum up this section, the two core structural ideas are, first, viewing the routine as a narrative that explains why you do things.
And second, consciously replacing those basic linkers with more sophisticated vocabulary and these complex relational sentence structures.
That's the entire foundation. You're showing your linguistic skill by creating a structured, cohesive, and intentional narrative that expresses your character.
All right, so we've built the structure. Now we need to fill it with the right materials. This brings us to section 2, precision in action. We need a vocabulary that captures not just the action, but the attitude, the mindset, the strategy behind it.
Let's start with the most basic action of all. Waking up. As we said, I wake up is functional, but it's completely neutral. A C1 speaker uses language that instantly conveys their attitude toward the morning.
Okay, so what if, like a lot of people, you're reluctant? You struggle with that transition from sleep to wakefulness.
Then the language has to reflect that struggle with vivid imagery. Instead of saying, I get up slowly, you could use the expression, I have to drag myself out of bed every morning.
Drag myself out of bed.
Yeah.
That's so immediate. You can feel the physical resistance, the reluctance. It's emotional labor described in a simple phrase.
Or a related option we found was to struggle to surface.
I like that one.
It suggests you're deep underwater, figuratively speaking, and you're emerging slowly and with difficulty from this profound state of sleep. It adds so much texture.
It allows the listener to really empathize with the effort involved. Okay, now let's do the complete opposite, the energized early bird. We need language that signals immediate, purposeful activity.
The classic, powerful idiom here is to hit the ground running. For example, you could say, I can't afford to waste time in the morning. I hit the ground running as soon as my alarm sounds.
Right. It suggests instant, high-energy readiness and productivity. There's no grogginess implied at all.
Not at all. And for those who might prefer something a little more formal or even literary,
There's an alternative.
there is a beautiful older idiom to rise with the lark. It paints this picture of waking up cheerfully and very early, just like the bird itself. It's a lovely touch for a more reflective style of narrative.
And finally, what about the middle ground? The person who deliberately chooses calm over speed. They're not reluctant, but they're not manic either.
For that gentle, deliberate transition, the phrasing is critical. To ease into the day. As in, I prefer to ease into the day with 30 minutes of quiet meditation before the barrage of notifications begins.
That shows a conscious, managed choice. It suggests you value inner calm and reflection over frantic activity.
The verb choice reflects your entire philosophy. Now, once you're alert, the focus shifts to work. How do we describe initiating a task beyond just saying, I start work?
It feels like there must be dozens of ways.
There are, and they all frame the task differently. If you're initiating a process that involves ongoing activity or a team, the common idiom is to get the ball rolling.
Every Monday morning, I get the ball rolling by sending out the weekly objective summary.
Exactly. It signals the start of a collaborative process.
But what if the first task isn't collaborative? What if it's large, complex, maybe even a bit intimidating?
Then you need a different verb. You would use tackle. I believe in confronting the hardest tasks first, so I always tackle the most demanding client report while my mind is still fresh.
Tackle. It has connotations of wrestling with something difficult, confronting a challenge head-on.
It implies strength and sustained focus.
So tackling implies intensity and difficulty. How does that differ from the feeling of just having a high volume of work, like a mountain of emails?
That's a key distinction. For high volume, where the challenge is sheer quantity rather than complexity, we use a verb that suggests determined, grinding effort to plow through.
As in, I spend the first hour simply plowing through the backlog of unread emails.
Exactly. Plowing suggests moving steadily and relentlessly through something dense and difficult, like a field. It's about endurance, not confrontation.
That's incredibly descriptive. So tackle is for complex confrontation.
Well,
Plow through is for volume-based endurance. What if the start is more methodical, about planning and organizing?
then you'd use a phrasal verb that signals deliberate intention, like to set about planning my schedule for the day. It shows you're actively structuring your day, not just reacting to it.
And let's not forget that great nautical metaphor for preparation we mentioned earlier, to clear the decks.
Yes, I like to clear the decks of any minor administrative tasks, the quick phone calls, the simple sign-offs before I knuckle down to the main project.
It's a fantastic image. It suggests you're removing all the clutter and distraction before the serious work can begin.
You're preparing your mental space for deep focus.
So the key insight here is that the verb choice tackling, plowing through, clearing the decks, it frames the action. It lets the listener understand your mindset and your strategy, which is infinitely more sophisticated than just stating what you do.
You're describing the experience of the work, not just the steps. That level of linguistic precision is the hallmark of an advanced narrator.
Okay, moving on to section 3. We've mastered the structural glue and the high-impact verbs, but what about the moments that are just mundane? Drinking coffee, walking to the bus stop, having a quick lunch. How do we elevate these ordinary actions?
This is a real challenge. It's where C1 learners can still struggle because they fall back on simple functional language for these simple functional tasks. The trick is to use language to breathe life into the routine.
Let's start with drinking coffee. I drink coffee as, well, it's dull. The first technique is to shift the focus to the sensory experience.
Yes. Avoid the verb drink if you can, or at least support it with vivid adverbs. Instead, focus on what you're seeing, smelling, or tasting. For example, I take a few moments every morning to savor the robust aroma of a freshly brewed espresso before taking the first sip.
The change is immediate. Savor implies enjoyment, deliberation, pleasure. And robust aroma is this powerful, almost tangible collocation that just evokes the smell.
You've transformed a simple biological need into a conscious, enjoyable ritual.
And we can apply this to sight as well. Instead of, I look out the window, you could personify the environment.
Something like, I take a moment at the beginning of my quiet time to watch the city slowly come to life, watching the first buses trundle past.
Trundle past is a nice touch. It gives the bus that heavy, slow, slightly awkward movement. That personification makes the city an active character in your story.
And this brings us to technique too. Using vivid and precise verbs that carry emotional weight, especially when you're describing something like the daily commute.
Let's focus on a negative commute first. If it's a struggle, the verbs should signal that negative emotional experience.
So you might say, I have to trudge to the station and then squeeze onto a packed, suffocating train.
The verbs are doing all the heavy lifting there. Trudge implies heavy, reluctant, tired movement. And squeeze just captures that physical discomfort of overcrowding perfectly.
You've described the difficulty and the pressure without ever having to use a generic adjective like unpleasant.
Now the opposite. What if the commute is actually pleasant? A leisurely walk, maybe?
Then you choose verbs that convey comfort and ease. I stroll the 3 blocks to the station and settle into my favorite corner seat with a new podcast. Stroll suggests leisure, settle into suggests comfort. The verb choice defines the emotional color of that part of your narrative.
Next, let's talk about adjectives and adverbs. At the C1 level, we want to avoid the obvious modifiers and focus on describing the purpose or the effect of an action, adding that psychological insight.
Right, so instead of, I have a quick shower, which is purely about time, use adjectives that describe the resulting feeling. I always take a brisk, invigorating shower to properly jolt myself awake and set the tone for the day.
Brisk and invigorating. They describe the feeling and the purpose. You're answering the unstated question, why is the shower quick? Because it's designed to jolt you awake. It's deliberate.
And the same goes for adverbs, especially when describing work pressure. Think about a rushed lunch.
I usually grab a sandwich and hastily eat it at my desk while continuing to monitor my email.
That adverb, hastily, instantly signals a sense of pressure, of a lack of time. It reflects a workplace culture where breaks are minimized.
That one subtle word tells the listener that the speaker is stressed or busy.
Finally, technique 4. Simple figurative language. This is how you make the mundane truly memorable. Similes and metaphors can provide instant visual or conceptual understanding.
We talked about the overwhelming email inbox. A great simile for that is, opening my inbox in the morning is like opening a floodgate.
That is so instantly relatable. The floodgate metaphor conveys an overwhelming, unstoppable volume. It's far more impactful than just saying, I have many emails.
Or, to describe a period of quiet time, you could use a metaphor that reflects its value to you. Something like, that first hour of the day is a sanctuary of calm before the chaos begins.
Sanctuary. It frames that time as a sacred, protected space. It's immensely valued. This simple metaphor reveals your profound need for peace and structure. It adds not just description, but real emotional depth.
These tools, sensory language, precise verbs, evocative adverbs, and simple figures of speech, are what turn a checklist into a vivid personal story.
Now we move to section 4, where we tackle the grammar of habit. Relying only on the present simple tense, even with all these wonderful new words, can still make the routine sound a bit robotic.
Right. We need structures that convey nuance, predictability, and self-analysis.
Yeah.
This is where C1 fluency really shines. Let's start with a structure that's often misunderstood by learners, using the modal verb will to describe present habits.
This is a subtle yet powerful tool. When we use will for a present habit, it adds this sense of expectation, of predictability, and just a natural conversational flow. If you say, I check my emails, it's just a statement of fact.
But if you say, typically the first thing I'll do when I get to my desk is check my emails, that will doesn't indicate the future.
No, it signals a consistent automatic tendency. It's your standard operating procedure. It's what the listener can expect you to do.
It shifts the description from a dry fact to a description of a consistent character trait. How does that compare to just using this simple present with an adverb, like I usually check my emails?
Well, I usually check my emails is perfectly correct, but the modal will adds a layer of inevitability and expectation. It's almost like you're making an analytical observation about yourself. It just sounds a little softer, more natural.
And it works for describing others' habits too, right?
Oh, absolutely. When the team is under pressure, they'll often order pizza and stay until midnight. It's an expectation based on past behavior.
A great point. Okay, now let's discuss the structure that adds a powerful emotional layer to habits. The present continuous combined with frequency adverbs like always, constantly, or forever.
This one is primarily used to express irritation or frustration. The use of the continuous tense implies the habit is ongoing and, probably unwelcome.
So if I say, my colleague leaves his dirty mugs on my desk, that's a simple fact.
But if you say, my colleague is always leaving his dirty mugs on my desk, that statement is loaded with irritation. The combination of the continuous tense and the adverb always just emphasizes the unacceptable, repetitive nature of the action.
It's basically a grammatical mechanism for complaining.
It is. And as a learner, you have to be aware of how powerful and usually negative this structure is.
Is it always negative, though? Or can it be used positively?
Occasionally, yes. It can describe a strong, defining positive habit, often used affectionately. For instance, she's forever offering to help people, even when she has too much on her own plate. But generally, you should assume it signals irritation unless the context is overwhelmingly positive.
Good to know. Okay, now for the final grammatical goldmine in this section. Analytical phrases. Phrases that signal a high level of self-awareness.
These are phrases like have a tendency to, be inclined to, and be prone to. They signal that you're not just acting, but you're observing and categorizing your own patterns.
Let's start with have a tendency to. This suggests an observed pattern, almost a statistical likelihood. So instead of, I procrastinate, you'd say.
You'd say, I have a tendency to put off difficult tasks until the last minute. It sounds self-aware, almost clinical.
And be inclined to. That feels softer.
It is. It suggests a natural preference or a gentle internal pull. If given the choice, I'm inclined to go for a long walk rather than stay inside. It's a disposition, a lean towards one option.
And then there's be prone to, which feels like it carries the heaviest weight. It signals a vulnerability or a weakness toward a negative outcome.
Precisely. I'm prone to getting distracted by social media notifications when I'm working. This suggests a recurring, sometimes unwanted problem. You wouldn't say, I'm prone to eating healthy food. Prone to is reserved for susceptibility to something negative.
The subtle difference between tendency, inclined, and prone is where a C1 speaker really proves their command of the language.
Absolutely. Okay, we've established structure, vocabulary, and grammar. Now let's inject the energy, the rhythm, and the realism that comes from the daily struggle. Section 5 is all about idioms and phrasal verbs for daily flow and challenges.
Idioms are the lifeblood of sounding natural. Let's start with intense focus, that moment after a break when you need to re-engage. We mentioned knuckle down earlier.
Knuckle down is perfect for that moment of renewed, serious concentration. After I've cleared the decks, it's the perfect time to really knuckle down and focus on the complex drafting work. It implies serious, non-distractible effort.
And for those huge, overwhelming tasks that you can't finish in one sitting, we use that visual idiom of incremental effort. Chip away at something.
A powerful idiom. It creates the image of a sculptor slowly reducing a massive block of material. I have a huge report due next month, so I spend an hour each morning just chipping away at the first section. It conveys determination and steady progress.
We also need to talk about purposeful breaks. I mean, take a break is fine, but we need more color.
A natural colloquial phrase for a short pause is to take 5. As in, we've been at this for 2 hours, let's take 5 and stretch our legs. It suggests 5 minutes, but it's used generally for any brief rest.
And if the purpose of the break is psychological, to address mental fatigue,
then we use the idiom that defines its intention to clear your head.
I was getting bogged down in the data, so I went for a quick walk to clear my head.
Yes, it clarifies that the break's function is to remove distracting thoughts and return with a fresh perspective.
Now, let's fast forward to ending the workday. Beyond I finish work, we need those common natural phrasal verbs.
The standard one, whether you use a physical clock or not, is to clock off or clock out. I try to clock off around 5:30 p.m. sharp.
And for that conclusive decision to stop work, we often say, call it a day.
Right. The budget figures are just not balancing. I think we should call it a day and tackle this tomorrow morning. It implies a final, mutual decision.
Once you've called it a day, the evening phase begins. The language has to reflect the process of shedding stress. The key phrasal verb here is to wind down.
Wind down. It's like unwinding a tightly wound spring. It's that gradual process of reducing mental activity and stress. My evening routine involves reading for an hour to slowly wind down before bed.
And we have to emphasize the subtle but crucial difference between winding down the process and switching off the mental state.
A huge distinction. To truly switch off means stopping your brain from processing work-related thoughts. You could be winding down physically while making dinner, but your brain might not be able to switch off.
I find it incredibly difficult to properly switch off after a high-pressure day. That perfectly captures that internal struggle.
Now, a realistic daily narrative also has to include the language of struggle. Procrastination, delays, pressure.
Let's start with intentional delay. The idiom for temporary deprioritization is to put something on the back burner, a cornerstone idiom.
Yes. The cooking metaphor is excellent. The most urgent pots are on the front burners. The task on the back burner is just simmering, awaiting its turn. It implies you plan to return to it.
But if the delay is more formal, maybe even long-term,
then you need a stronger verb, like to shelve. The board decided to shelve the expansion project until the next quarter. Shelving suggests as a hard stop, a more serious, possibly indefinite suspension.
What about when you are actively working, but you get stuck?
Two vivid idioms here. If you're focusing too much on minor aspects that halt your progress, you get bogged down in the details. It creates that visual of being stuck in a marsh.
And if the obstacle is absolute, requiring new information or a totally new approach,
then you hit a brick wall. We were making good progress on the analysis, but we've hit a brick wall with the regulatory approvals. It implies an immovable block.
And finally, the language of pressure. To be up against the clock.
A powerful visual idiom that portrays the clock as an adversary. We are genuinely up against the clock to get this proposal finished by Friday. It conveys a strong sense of active urgency.
And finishing at the very last second is working down to the wire.
Exactly. Borrowed from horse racing, it conveys suspense and last-minute success.
And all this complexity requires prioritization. The descriptive idiom for that is to sort the wheat from the chaff.
A classic farming metaphor. It means separating the valuable, worthwhile tasks, the wheat, from the trivial or useless ones, the chaff. I spend my first 15 minutes sorting the wheat from the chaff in my inbox.
That provides a really robust toolkit for injecting realism and dynamism into the narrative of your day.
This brings us to our final section, Section 6, which is perhaps the most complex layer for the advanced learner, the cultural lens. We have to understand that the way we narrate our routine is profoundly influenced by cultural values.
Right. Language is never neutral. Our sources showed a fascinating contrast between two distinct cultural scripts. Let's start with what they called hustle culture.
This is a script where the narrative is performative. The language is high energy, aggressive, often borrowed from business or tech. The goal is to signal ambition, productivity, and a kind of superhuman work ethic.
The vocabulary is all about maximizing output. Things like optimizing performance, maximizing every minute, tackling challenges head-on.
A speaker reflecting this culture might frame their morning like this. My day starts at 5 a.m. with high-intensity interval training. I believe in optimizing my performance before I even open my laptop. I attack my to-do list. Every word choice signals output.
Now let's contrast that with the work-life balance cultural script.
Here, the language is much softer. It emphasizes boundaries, mental health. The narrative is designed to highlight rituals of disconnection and respect for personal time.
So instead of maximizing time, the focus is on protecting it. You hear statements like, I make a point of clocking off at 5 p.m. sharp, or describing an evening walk as a ritual of disconnection.
That word ritual is so telling. It suggests a respected, consistent practice that can't be broken. It reflects a clear separation of identities.
And this cultural lens extends beyond just work, doesn't it? Even into something as simple as eating lunch.
Oh, definitely. In cultures where lunch is a social event, the adjectives signal its importance. They take a proper, leisurely lunch. Proper and leisurely frame it as a valued cultural practice.
And that's in stark contrast to the language of speed and convenience you might hear elsewhere, to grab a sandwich and hastily eat it at your desk.
The vocabulary signals that the meal is secondary to work, functional, not social.
It's all about perceived value, and this must apply to leisure time as well.
Absolutely. You can prioritize self-improvement, a coding course, or truly unstructured rest. And if you value that rest, you use powerful, protective language.
Like, my evenings are sacrosanct.
Sacrosanct is the C1 word for protection. It frames leisure as a sacred entity, too valuable to be infringed upon. It reflects the immense value placed on simply being rather than doing.
So the task for the advanced learner is twofold. First, you have to recognize these cultural undertones in the language you hear.
And second, you have to consciously select language that accurately reflects your own values and priorities, depending on the context. You'd use different idioms in a job interview than you would talking to a friend about managing stress.
That intentional strategic choice is the absolute pinnacle of advanced language use.
It proves you haven't just memorized phrases. You understand how to deploy them to craft a targeted narrative.
Okay, that brings us to the synthesis. We've covered the 5 major elements of the C1 linguistic toolkit for this.
Let's do a quick summary. 1, the narrative mindset, seeing your routine as self-expression.
2, sophisticated linkers, like invariably and paves the way for.
3, precise verbs and sensory language. Tackle, savor, trudge.
4, advanced grammar using will for habit and phrases like prone to or inclined to.
And 5, idioms and cultural awareness. Knuckle down, switch off, sort the wheat from the chaff.
That is a colossal amount of material. Trying to cram it all in at once would just lead to overload.
It would. So the practical application has to be about incremental integration.
This is the most important advice. We have to tell the listener to start with targeted upgrades. Pick one segment of your day, the morning coffee, the commute, and just commit this week to describing that one segment using 1 or 2 new techniques.
Exactly. This week, maybe just focus on describing your commute with precise verbs, stroll versus trudge, and then try using the modal will to describe the first thing you do at your desk. Let the new language integrate naturally.
And now for our final provocative challenge, the true test of fluency and narrative mastery. We want you to craft a 1-minute narrative, written or recorded, describing one defined section of your day.
But here's the crucial step. Before you write or speak a single word, decide on a clear intention or theme. What is the single overarching impression you want to convey?
For example, if your chosen theme is relentless efficiency, you will strategically select language like hitting the ground running, tackling reports, and being up against the clock.
Conversely, if your theme is mindful deliberation, you'll select language like easing into the day, savoring the aroma, and making sure you switch off completely.
This forces you, the learner, to use the language with purpose. You're making conscious, strategic choices to achieve a specific communicative goal.
And that is the ultimate shift. It proves you haven't just memorized the list of C1 phrases, but that you have the strategic ability to deploy them intentionally. It transforms you from a language learner into an articulate, confident narrator of your own sophisticated experience.
A perfect note to conclude on. We hope this deep dive has given you the foundational structure, the precise vocabulary, and the grammatical tools to transform how you talk about your daily life.
Thank you all for joining us on this essential exploration. Now, go forth and tell your story with intention and purpose.